Welcome back. In the previous section we added a lot of geometry in the isometric view. This is great for precise positioning in 2 dimensions, but it ignores the 3rd dimension. So now we need to adjust the new geometry we added to account for that 3rd dimension. So let's switch back to perspective view. First thing you're probably noticing is that the model has become much harder to read. It's getting a lot harder to tell which edges are going where. I find at this point it's helpful to put the opacity back to full. To change the opacity settings during point edit, we need to bring the Mesh Edit Settings panel back up. This panel is only visible when the point edit mode is first entered, so we need to right-click to exit point edit mode, then right-click again to re-enter point edit mode. With the Mesh Edit Settings panel up, move the opacity slider to full opacity. Now as we rotate around, it's much easier to see the shape of the model. Overall, it's looking pretty good. Let's start with the top of the head. Choose Pick and Paint selected and set the element type to vertices. Adjust the view to get a good angle to start, and let's pull these vertices in some to round out the head more. The extra geometry we added in the previous step allows us to refine the shape to something vaguely more fish-like. Keep in mind while moving the vertices that we've already placed them where we want them in X and Z, so we only need to move them in Y. As we work our way around towards the back of the jaw, you'll notice that some of the model is too dark to see the details. It's particularly apparent if we navigate the view to show more of the area under the jaw. Let's add an ambient light to the scene to make those areas easier to see. Right-click to exit out of point edit mode. Select the ambient light from the light's flyout. The cursor will change to an icon that looks like a sun. Click drag in the 3D view to add the ambient light to the scene and to size it to a reasonable size in one go. Right-click to exit the Light Primitive tool. Now find the ambient brick in the link editor and double-click on the color property. Let's make it a little bit brighter. Because our edges are black, we want to make sure that the darkest part of the model will be bright enough that it still contrasts well with our edges. With that done, let's move the light out of the way. Go back to the link editor and double-click the title bar of the ambient brick to minimize it. Select the fish object, but before we go back into point edit mode, let's take a moment to pull it away from the image template using the blue cylinder of the widget. This will give us a bit more room to work on our model. Right-click on the model and let's go back into point edit mode. Position the view so that you have a good view of the jaw. Now start pulling out the vertices to round out the jaw and to give it some volume. This kind of work is very much trial and error as you move the vertices around to best describe the shapes. Working this way does really help to develop your ability to read 3D meshes, so even if you're having a hard time with it at first, keep practicing. Also, don't forget to move the view around. It helps to look at the model from many different directions when editing. Moving on to the mouth area, change the element type to face and select the 2 side faces of the mouth. Pull them in like so. This pulls in all the vertices around the 2 selected polygons in one motion. Switch back to vertices and adjust the corner vertices to bring them in a bit more. Now we're ready to make the mouth opening. Change the element type to face and select all 4 of the mouth faces. Find and select the delete icon. Now we have an opening for the fish's mouth. To build the interior of the mouth, we need to freeze the mirror, making the mirror geometry permanent. To do that, we will use the Flattened History tool. Right-click to exit out of point edit mode. Find and select the Flattened History icon. Click Yes when the warning dialog pops up. Our mesh is now one piece. Right-click on the mesh to re-enter point edit mode. Change the element type to edges. We're now going to add faces to bridge the interior of the mouth. Select each opposing edge and click the Form Face tool to create the new faces. You'll have to move the view around quite a bit to make sure you're selecting the correct edges. Remember that to select the second edge you will need to hold down the Control key. Also, if you make a mistake, clicking the undo icon or Control Z will undo it. Some operations have multiple steps, so you may have to undo several times to get back to before you made the mistake. Now if we take a look at the ends, notice they are a little bit different since they are triangles. We could do these by selecting all 3 faces and clicking the Form Face tool, but let's do something different. Change the element type to Edge Loop. Now select the loop formed by the triangle and click the Form Face tool. Repeat this for the last remaining hole. Next, we need to add a center line for the mouth interior so that the model can be cut in half and the mirror hooked back up. Click in an empty space to clear the selection. Select the Poly Draw tool, and let's turn on point snapping to make adding this cut easier. Right-click on the point snapping icon to bring up its options panel. Make sure Edge Points is set to 1. This is the number of snap points that will be added to the edges. Setting it to 1 will put the snap point in the middle, which is what we want. Since we only want to snap to the midpoint, let's turn off these other options to prevent accidental snapping that we don't want. Go ahead and click at the top of the triangle to start the cut. Notice now when you mouse over an edge, there is a blue diamond that turns yellow as the cursor nears it. The yellow indicates that it is snapped, and left-clicking will add a vertex at that point. Continue the process all the way around until you get to the end of the bottom lip. You'll have to zoom in and adjust your view a few times to make it all the way around the mouth. When done, right-click to complete the tool. Let's take a quick look around the model to make sure we got the wanted cut. Then, since we're done using the point snapping, click on the point snapping icon to turn point snapping off. Now we're ready to cut the fish in half again. So switch to the left view and frame up on the fish. Change the element type to faces and the selection method to rectangle select. Also make sure select from all elements is selected. Drag select all the faces on the right half of the model, then find and click the delete icon to remove those faces. Go back into perspective view. Now that we're back to half a fish, let's hook the mirror back up. Change the element type to edge loop and the selection method to pick and paint selected. Click on one of the inner edges to select the inner loop. Then find and select the mirror modeler icon to activate the mirror. Left click in an empty spot to clear the selection. We'll stop here for now. In the next section, I'll continue on with shaping the interior of the mouth and adding the eye.